Her stepmother never hit her where anyone could see. She was 12 years old, doing the work of a grown woman before the sun came up, scrubbing, fetching, pounding, while her father left for work humming happily, completely unaware that the moment that gate closed, the house became something else entirely. Folashade had two choices: speak up and risk destroying the only happiness she had watched return to her father's eyes after 3 years of grief, or stay silent and carry it alone. She chose silence. For 3 years, she chose silence, until a boy in a faded Arsenal jersey found her crying by the bush and decided, quietly and without drama, that he was not going to look away. Stay with me till the end, because this story is going to take you somewhere beautiful, but it has to break your heart a little first. Before we continue, if you're finding value in the stories we bring to you here, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. We post brand new African stories every single week, and every subscription, every comment, every share tells us that these stories matter to you. That means the world to us, and it's what keeps us going. It truly is what allows us to keep creating. Now, let's get back to the story. Folashade had a theory about shadows. She believed that if you could make yourself thin enough, quiet enough, small enough, you could slip into one and disappear entirely. She had been practicing since she was 9 years old, the year her father married Yetunde. Before Yetunde, the house on Adegoke Street had been a house of warmth. Her father, Babatunde Adeyemi, was a man whose laughter came easily and loudly, the kind that rattled window frames. He worked as a secondary school vice principal, a man of routine and dignity, who came home every evening smelling of chalk dust and carried peppermint in his breast pocket for Folashade. Her mother, Ronke, had died when Folashade was 6, a brief illness that moved too fast for the doctors to chase, and so for 3 years it had been just the two of them, father and daughter, two halves of a broken whole, learning to make a home out of what remained. Then Yetunde came. She arrived in their lives the way certain storms do, first as a distant rumble at the edge of the horizon, then suddenly, devastatingly overhead. She was a tall woman with a face that could arrange itself beautifully for company and rearrange into something else entirely when the company left. Babatunde saw only the beautiful arrangement. He saw a woman who laughed at his jokes and served his food hot and called him Ogami in that musical way that made him feel like a king in his own house. He saw a woman who said all the right things about Folashade. She's so clever, this one. She will go far. He did not see what happened after he left for school in the mornings. Nobody did. And Folashade, for reasons she could not fully explain even to herself, kept it that way. Maybe it was because she feared he wouldn't believe her. Yetunde was clever about it. She left no marks that stayed long, chose her moments with the precision of someone who had done this before. Or maybe Folashade kept silent because she loved her father too much to shatter the happiness she saw creeping back into his eyes after 3 years of grief. He laughed again. He hummed in the bathroom. He came home with 2 packets of peppermints now, one for himself, one for Yetunde. And Folashade told herself that this was worth something, that his joy was worth the price she paid for it quietly behind closed doors. The rules of the house changed swiftly after Yetunde moved in. Folashade was to wake at 5 to sweep the compound before her father rose for his morning prayers. She was to fetch water from the borehole 3 streets away because Yetunde insisted the tap water tasted off. She was to wash the dishes, scrub the bathroom, pound pepper in the mortar while her back ached. And she was to do all of this without complaint, without expression, without the luxury of being a child. "You think this is your father's house," Yetunde would say, her voice low and controlled, never loud enough to travel beyond the kitchen walls. "You are a visitor here. Visitors work for their keep." She was 12 when Yetunde first struck her, a slap so sudden and clean it left a ringing in her ear that lasted 2 days. The offense had been small. She had accidentally used Yetunde's good cup to serve a neighbor water. After that, the slaps came with less provocation, and then with almost none at all. A look, a slow step, a sigh at the wrong moment. Folashade learned to move through the house like a ghost. She knew which floorboards creaked and which did not. She learned to read Yetunde's moods like sailors read weather. The particular set of the woman's jaw, the speed at which she stirred her tea, the way her left eye twitched before something bad was going to happen. She became fluent in the language of danger. At school, nobody knew. She was a quiet, studious girl who sat near the window and drew small flowers in the margins of her notebooks. Her teachers said she was bright but distant. Her classmates thought her strange but harmless. She had one friend, a girl named Temi, who sometimes shared her biscuits at break time. But even Temi did not know the truth of Folashade's life. Some silences are held so long, they calcify into something you can no longer speak around. By the time Folashade was 15, she had perfected the art of invisibility. She existed in the margins. She asked for nothing, expected nothing, hoped for very little. She had folded her grief and her fury into a very small, very tight square and tucked it somewhere deep in her chest, and she moved through each day the way a person moves through a burning building, carefully, carefully, not breathing too much of the smoke. The bush at the edge of Fadeyi Road was not much of a bush, really. It was a strip of wild green that survived despite the steady march of concrete. A tangle of elephant grass, stubborn palm shrubs, and a single neem tree whose roots had cracked the ground around it like a broken plate. The children of the neighborhood avoided it because of snakes. The adults ignored it because it served no useful purpose. Folashade had discovered it 2 years ago and claimed it as her own. She went there when she needed to cry.
This was important, the where of crying. She had learned that tears in the house were weapons Yetunde could use. She had learned that crying in school drew attention she did not want. But the bush was neutral ground, a place outside the territory of her misery, and so she went there every time the pressure in her chest grew too enormous to contain. It was a Tuesday in March when everything changed. The harmattan had finally broken, and the air smelled of rain that had not yet decided to fall. Folashade had arrived home from school that afternoon to find Yetunde in a fury over a missing earring, a gold stud that had rolled under the dresser, and which Folashade had nothing to do with. But logic was not the point. The point was that Yetunde needed somewhere to place her rage, and Folashade was always the nearest surface. She had been struck twice, once across the cheek, once on the shoulder, before managing to slip out the back gate with the excuse of fetching water. She did not take the bucket. She walked the 3 streets to Fadeyi Road and ducked into the bush and sat down at the base of the neem tree and pulled her knees to her chest and let herself come apart. She was not aware of how much time passed. She was not aware of very much at all. Only the hot lick of tears and the old exhausted ache of being unwanted in a place you were supposed to call home. Hey! The voice startled her so badly she scrambled to her feet, nearly twisting her ankle on a root. A boy stood at the edge of the bush. He was perhaps 17 or 18, tall in a way that was still catching up with itself, broad shoulders, but a face that had not yet finished deciding what it wanted to look like. He was carrying a football tucked under one arm and wearing a faded Arsenal jersey, and he was looking at her with an expression of careful concern, like someone trying very hard not to alarm an animal they'd found caught in a trap. "Sorry," he said quickly. "I didn't mean to scare you. I saw you from the road." He paused. "Are you okay?" Folashade wiped her face with the back of her hand. "I'm fine," she said, which was what she always said, which meant nothing at all. The boy did not move. He also did not look convinced. He had a direct kind of gaze, dark and steady, and it was unsettling in its sincerity. Most people, she had found, were satisfied by "fine" and moved on. This one seemed to actually be calculating something behind his eyes. "You don't look fine," he said, not unkindly, just honestly. I said I'm fine. "Okay." He stood there another moment. "My name is Kolade. I live on Balogun Street. I've seen you walking home from school before." He said this last part without embarrassment, as though it was simply a piece of data he was sharing for the purpose of orientation. Folashade looked at him more carefully now. She had seen him too, she realized, a peripheral figure, someone who existed in the background of her neighborhood without ever resolving into a specific person. He had kind eyes. She wasn't sure she trusted kind eyes. In her experience, they were often a performance. Folashade, she said finally. That's a beautiful name. He said it simply, without flirtation, and somehow that made it land more genuinely than any elaboration would have. Do you want me to leave? She considered this. The honest answer surprised her. No. The company of another human being, a neutral one, an outside one, felt in that moment like water after a long thirst. You can sit, she said, and gestured vaguely at the ground. He sat. He put the football between his knees and didn't say anything for a while, and the silence that stretched between them was not uncomfortable. The almost rain smell grew stronger. A Hadada ibis called from somewhere overhead. You don't have to tell me anything, Kolade said eventually, but I'm a good listener. My mother says it's my only useful quality. Folashade laughed. It came out small and unpracticed, like a sound she had forgotten she was capable of making, and it surprised her so much that she laughed again at herself laughing. Kolade smiled. It transformed his face entirely. She didn't tell him everything that day. She told him a little, enough to feel the relief of putting words outside her body for the first time. She told him that things at home were difficult, that her stepmother was not kind, that she felt very alone sometimes. She told him these things carefully, in pieces, watching his face for judgment or disbelief, or the particular flicker that meant he was about to say something useless like, "Have you tried talking to her?" None of that came. He listened the way very few people listen, without preparing his response while she spoke, without reaching for solutions, without minimizing. He just received what she offered and held it respectfully. You shouldn't have to live like that, he said when she finished. A lot of people live like this, she said. That doesn't make it right. Simple, clean. She felt something in her chest loosen slightly, like a knot giving a fraction of slack. They talked until the air turned purple with evening, and then Kolade walked her to the edge of Adegoke Street and said goodnight, and Folashade went home and endured Yetunde's cold silence over dinner and her father's oblivious cheerfulness, and lay in her bed that night thinking about the boy in the Arsenal jersey who had simply sat with her in the bush and not looked away. They fell into a rhythm without planning one. Tuesdays and Thursdays after school, and sometimes on Saturday mornings, Folashade would find Kolade already at the neem tree, or he would find her there, and they would sit and talk. He brought snacks sometimes, groundnuts, chin-chin, once a whole pack of digestive biscuits that they finished in one sitting. She brought her notebooks occasionally and showed him her marginal flower drawings, and he studied them with a seriousness that made her feel like an artist rather than a nervous girl who doodled when she was anxious. She learned things about him gradually. He was in SS3, preparing for his WAEC examinations. He wanted to study architecture. His father was a building contractor and his mother a seamstress who worked from their sitting room, and their home on Balogun Street was small and loud and full of younger siblings, 3 of them, all boys, all catastrophically energetic. He found the bush restful for the same reason she did. It was quiet, and quiet was hard to come by in both their lives. He did not push her. This was the thing she came to appreciate most about Kolade. His patience was not passive, not indifferent. It was an active, deliberate giving of space. He could tell when she wanted to talk and when she needed to simply sit and be, and he adjusted himself accordingly with a sensitivity that seemed remarkable in someone his age. As the weeks passed, she told him more. The full story emerged in fragments: the daily labor, the calculated cruelty, the slaps, the words that cut deeper than slaps, the careful architecture of Yetunde's abuse designed to be invisible to Babatunde. Kolade listened to all of it, and she watched the muscles in his jaw tighten and his hands curl when she described certain things, and knew that he was angry, genuinely, protectively angry, in a way that felt entirely different from being in danger. His anger was not at her, it was for her. "Your father has to know," he said one afternoon, when she told him about a particularly bad week. Yetunde had poured a full pot of cold water over her head, for supposedly not rinsing the soup pot properly. "He won't believe me," Folashade said. "You don't know how she is in front of him. She becomes a different person. Then we make him see. Kolade, I'm not saying today, I'm not saying rashly," he looked at her steadily, "but we can't just let this continue indefinitely. You deserve better than this." She didn't know what to say to that. "You deserve better" was a sentence she hadn't heard directed at her in a very long time. She looked at her hands. Something was changing between them. She was aware of it the way you become aware of a slow tide, not in the individual moments, but in the cumulative shift of the landscape. He walked her home now, all the way to her gate, and lingered in conversation longer than was strictly necessary. He had a way of looking at her, direct and warm and slightly unguarded, that made her feel simultaneously seen and shy. She had begun to notice specific things about him: the way he ran his hand through his hair when he was thinking, the half dimple on his left cheek that only appeared when he smiled at something that surprised him, the quiet reliability of his presence. She was not naive. She understood what this feeling was. She simply wasn't sure she was allowed to have it. The confrontation she had been dreading, and also, she admitted to herself, the one Yetunde had been building toward, came on a Friday evening in May. Her father had gone for a school staff dinner that would keep him out until late. Yetunde had invited 2 friends from her prayer group for a visit, and the women had stayed into the evening, and by the time they left, something about their presence, the admiration they'd shown Yetunde, the fine china, the small performance of a well-managed household, had wound Yetunde into a particular kind of mood. The mood that came after performance, when the audience was gone and the mask came off, and all the resentment that had been packed behind the smile needed somewhere to go. She called Folashade into the kitchen. What followed was worse than a slap. Yetunde's words that evening were a full and deliberate dismantling. Folashade's worth, her intelligence, her dead mother, her future, her right to exist in this house. The woman spoke quietly, surgically, leaning close, her breath warm and her eyes flat, and her voice carrying the particular poison of someone who had been saving these words up for a while. Folashade stood and received it all and said nothing, because silence was armor. And when it was finally over, she went to her room and sat on the edge of her bed and did not cry, which was somehow worse than crying. She left the house before 6 the next morning. She went to the bush. She sat at the base of the neem tree and stared at the cracked earth between her feet and felt, for the first time, something close to defeat. Not sadness. She knew sadness. This was heavier. This was the weight of wondering if things would always be this way, if this was simply her life to be endured, if the version of herself that her stepmother described was the true one. Shade. She hadn't heard him coming. Kolade appeared through the elephant grass earlier than their usual time, still in the shorts and loose shirt he slept in, like he'd come straight from bed. His face was alert and concerned in the way faces are when something has woken them with urgency. "I saw you from our balcony, running almost. I called your name, but you didn't hear." He crouched in front of her, bringing himself to her eye level. "What happened?" She shook her head. "Folashade." Something about the way he said her full name, not shortened, not rushed, broke open the composure she had spent the whole walk here assembling. The story came out, all of it, including the words Yetunde had used, and as she spoke, she watched Kolade's face move through several emotions in rapid succession until it settled into a quiet, resolute expression she had not seen on him before. He sat silent for a long moment when she finished. Okay. He stood up. "Today we talk to your father. Kolade, I told you. I know what you told me. I know you are scared, but she listened to me." He sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched, and he said quietly, "What she said to you last night, none of that is true. None of it. Your mother was not a curse on you. You are not worthless. You are one of the most extraordinary people I have ever met, and I need you to know that before I say the next thing." She was looking at him now. Her vision was blurry, but she was looking at him. "The next thing," he continued quietly, "is that I am not going to just sit and watch this happen to you anymore. I care about you too much, more than as a friend." He paused, and something young and vulnerable crossed his face for a moment. "You already know that." She did know that. She had known it for weeks. She looked away, then back. "It's not simple," she said. "I know, but we'll do it together." He reached over and took her hand, and she let him, and they sat like that for a while in the early morning quiet before he spoke again. "Your father loves you. I've seen him from the road, the way he calls your name when he comes home, the way he looks at you. He doesn't know, but if he knew, he would not allow this. He is not that kind of man." She thought about this. She thought about the peppermint in her father's pocket, the way he called her Omomi, my child, with his whole chest, the way he held her hand at her mother's grave when she was 6 years old and said, "It's just us now, but we are enough." "I'm afraid," she said.